All right, here is the Honorable Judge Mark Boonstra talking about his books that he's written in all three volumes. I'm going to link a website where you can purchase them. And once again, thank you, Mark, for coming out and speaking about the founding fathers in their own words. And thank you for all you do on the bench for us.
Monuments of the Ten Commandments are torn down. There's constant litigation, which has become known as lawfare, designed to intimidate Christians and to force them to comply with an anti-Christian agenda. Indeed, the leftist elites in America are now shockingly trying to criminalize anything that runs counter to their agenda. Our kids are taught that everything is morally equivalent. They even want to take in God we trust off our coins and currencies. We could go on and on with example after example. But make no mistake, it is the bedrock principles underlying our Judeo-Christian value system that is under assault in every corner of our society today. Ultimately, that is the battle we're fighting. And not to oversimplify things, but candidly, and I appreciate that Joe sort of said this as well, it's a battle of good versus evil. And that's a battle that's been ongoing since Satan fell from heaven. We're simply seeing the modern day version of that play out before our very eyes. And it's not a battle of political parties, it's a battle of culture, of truth, of right and wrong, and of basic principles underlying all of humanity. But I fear it's a battle that we've been losing. And we've been losing it in part, I think, because for too long, only one side, the other side, has been fighting the battle. For too long we were asleep because at our core, all we want is to be left alone to live our own lives and raise our own kids the way we see fit. The problem is the godless left in America doesn't operate that way. They're not content simply to live their own lives. They think they also know what's best for your life, and they think they have the right to tell you how to raise your kids and how to live your lives. So what has happened over the last decades and maybe generations? The godless left has taken over education in America. They've taken over journalism in America. They've taken over entertainment in America. They took over social media in America. And as a result, they've come to shape and control everything that we see and hear, and therefore, over time, what we come to believe. The godless left has been playing the long game. I know there's a football game tonight, but they've been playing the long game, methodically biding their time, patiently fighting a battle with too little opposition, gaining more and more ground over time, hoping that they could cement a victory before we even knew what it is. The truth is, though, that the left, godless left, doesn't believe in the principles that led to America's founding. Their goal is to transform America into something they like better. They simply don't share the values of our founding fathers. Truth be told, they don't believe in freedom or equality. They don't believe in unalienable rights endowed to us by our Creator. They don't believe in any basic morality. In their world, everything is morally equivalent. That's why they want to transform the country into something it was never intended to be. The authoritarian left, and I call them authoritarian, I think they are. I don't know if they're communists or fascists or something in between or something else, but regardless, they're authoritarians. They believe only in imposing their will on the rest of us. I think in some sense they may be acting out of a sense of desperation because they know in their heart of hearts that most people don't support their agenda. So they try to impose it while they can using force and intimidation. Ultimately, what they want is to abolish our freedoms and our God-given rights and to foist their agenda on us by whatever means it takes. In their view, the ends justify the means. That, however, is not America. And so the battle in America today is between we the people and the elitist tyrants. It's between those of us who respect that our rights and freedoms come from God and the intolerant, authoritarian, and godless left. It's between those who share and respect the values of our founding fathers and those who don't. Freedom and equality, unalienable rights endowed to us by our Creator. Indeed, it's between those who believe in a Creator and those who believe only in themselves. It's those who believe in truth and basic morality, and those who believe there is no enduring truth and that everything is morally equivalent. It's between those of us who only want to live our own lives as we see fit and those who wish to impose their will upon the rest of us by any means necessary. And those are their words, as if the ends ever justify the means. Candidly, and let's not mince words, it's between those who love America and those who hate America and what America stood for since its founding. It's between those who share the values that made us great and those who want to transform America into something that it was never intended to be. It's between those who cherish our freedoms and our God-given rights and those who do not. Simply put, it's between those who believe in our Constitution and the principles underlying the Declaration of Independence and those, frankly, who don't. But I fear that we're becoming exactly what our founding fathers fought and rebelled against nearly 250 years ago. A nation where everything is dictated by government, where those in charge exercise their authority in tyrannical ways, where freedom of speech and even of thought no longer exists, where dissenters are punished under the law for expressing opinions with which the elites disagree, and where most fundamentally of all, we have banished God from our society. The same God who was the very inspiration for the founding of this country. Those are the concerns that led me into what became an 8-year journey that then turned into my book, which turned into 3 volumes, you can see at the back. In their own words, today's godless America, what would our founding fathers think? It was an effort to help educate and inform Americans about the founding of our country and about our founding fathers, who they were and what they said in their own words about religion and its proper place in our society. To help people understand the truth about our founding, to see for themselves how we're being transformed, and how we need to return to the founding principles of this nation. And by the way, my wife Martha is a contributor to the book, and we have a tribute in it to her grandfather. And I know we all said the Pledge of Allegiance earlier this evening, but I'm proud to say that he, as a congressman, her grandfather was Congressman Louis Robo from the Detroit area. He served from the 30s to the 60s, and he was a Democrat in the day. It was a different party back then, but I'm proud to say he authored the resolution that put the words "under God" in our Pledge of Allegiance, which President Eisenhower signed into law on Flag Day, June 14th, 1954. I started writing in their own words about 9 years ago, when I came to the conclusion that we had strayed far from what our founding fathers intended us to be as a country, and that the fundamental and overriding reason for that was that we had lost a God, and we had lost an appreciation for how central and fundamental our founders' belief in God was to the very founding of this country, and for how our founders' recognition that our rights and liberties come from God made us different from every other nation that had preceded us, and we became that shining city on a hill. And I thought things were bad 9 years ago when I started this effort. I could never have imagined we would get to where we are today. So what I tried to do in the book is to provide truthful and factual information about our founding fathers. And for my purposes for this book, I define that as anyone who signed one or more of our 3 founding documents: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the United States Constitution. That turned out to be 118 men. more than I realized I was taking on, I think, when I started the project. But I provide information about each of them, in particular with regard to their religious lives and beliefs. And I do that both in a short biography and, perhaps more importantly, in their own words, a series of quotations from each of them, what they said in their own words about religion, because people may or may not care what I think about any of this, but they ought to care what our founding fathers believed and what they said in their own words about religion and what its proper place is in our society. And then in each chapter I contrast that factual information and those quotations with one example from modern day America. And I simply pose the question to the reader, what would that signer think of that event? Or more generally, what would they think of where we are today in America? Let me just give you a few of the quotes and examples from the book and ask you to think about what these men would think of what we've done to the country they gave to us. And I don't know if you have it. I actually gave Amber a PowerPoint or sent her one. You may or may not have it, but you can put them up if you have them. Doesn't matter. So I'll read you just a few quotes, and you can think about who it is, and then I'll tell you. Quote, "The religion and public liberty of a people are intimately connected. Their interests are interwoven. They cannot subsist separately, and therefore they rise and fall together. For this reason, it is always observable that those who are combined to destroy the people's liberties practice every art to poison their morals." Does that ring true today? What do you think that was? That was Samuel Adams. The great Samuel Adams became known as the father of democracy. He was quite a firebrand revolutionary from Massachusetts, second cousin to President John Adams. Quote, "I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid?" That's the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin, who they want to tell you today was, he was just a deist. There must be religion. When that ligament is torn, society is disjointed, and its members perish. But the most important of all lessons is the denunciation of ruin to every state that rejects the precepts of religion. That was Gouverneur Morris, who became known as the penman of the Constitution. The only foundation for a useful education in a republic is to be laid in religion. Without this, there can be no virtue, and without virtue, there can be no liberty. And liberty is the object and life of all Republican government. What do you think Benjamin Rush would think about today's public schools in America? He, by the way, became known as the founder of American medicine. "Refiners may weave as fine a web of reason as they please, but the experience of all times shows religion to be the guardian of morals. And he must be a very inattentive observer in our country who does not see that avarice is accomplishing the destruction of religion for want of a legal obligation to contribute something to its support. He would require that we contribute to religion in our society, not establish a church, but in some fashion support religion." That was Richard Henry Lee of Virginia. The author, he's often forgotten, but he was the author of the Resolution of Independence that then was turned into the Declaration of Independence. And finally, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. That was the father of our country, George Washington, in his farewell address to America. Now let's come compare that with some of the headlines from today. And these are all out of the books. There's one in each chapter, and there's lots more than what I'm going to give you tonight. This one happened just down the road in Ludington. Remember this? Groups want cross removed from Lake Michigan shore. Here are some other examples, and many of these are from the school setting, but there's examples in the books from all aspects of our society. School sends sheriff to order child to stop sharing Bible verses. That was the Desert Rose Elementary School in Palmdale, California. And it was a situation, as I recall, where a mom would pack a lunch for her child for school every day and include in the lunch a Bible verse and a note explaining the Bible verse. And he liked them so much, he showed them to his friends, and they showed them to their friends. And before you know it, the school found out about it, and they said, no, you can't do that. So mom and dad said, okay. And they made sure that after that, the child only shared the verses off school grounds. And what did the school say? No, you can't do that. Even off school grounds. And mom and dad said, okay. If you ask me, maybe they should have said okay. And what happened then? They still sent the sheriff to their home to, under the threat of legal proceedings, make sure they knew they can't share Bible verses. School says offering to pray for a colleague is unacceptable. You can't offer to pray for your sick colleague at work. High school wants to shut down off-campus Jesus lunch. That was in Middleton, Wisconsin. And what that means is a group of moms would meet their high school kids off school grounds for a nice home-cooked meal where they would talk about Jesus. And the school said, you can't do that. We didn't approve the meal. A home-cooked meal that moms brought along, right? You think it was about the meal? How about this from Siloam Springs School District in Arkansas? Christian radio banned on school bus. Heaven forbid some kid on a bus might overhear in the background some Christian music playing. School band told to stop performing How Great Thou Art, one of our great Christian hymns, not allowed at school in Mississippi. Public school shuts down Bible Club. That's in Bartlett, Tennessee. And yet, in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, Satanic Temple hosts after-school Satan Club at Pennsylvania School. And finally, how about this? Harvard appoints atheist as president of university chaplains. Not everyone is happy. Now, I appreciate you want outreach to the atheist community, but really? The president of your chaplains? Speaking of Harvard, let's talk a little bit about some of our great universities, which many of the founding fathers attended. Harvard's been much in the news lately, hasn't it, with the resignation of its president, Claudine Gay. It was the first college in North America. It was a Puritan institution founded for what purpose? Training ministers. Its first president was the Reverend Henry Dunster. And it had a long history of clergymen who served as its president, as did most of the universities we're going to talk about. Yale was founded as a congregational institution. Its first president was the Reverend Thomas Clapp. Among the other clergymen presidents of Yale was the famous Ezra Stiles, who was a friend of many of our founding fathers. Columbia, then it was called King's College, was founded as an Anglican, today we would say Episcopalian institution. Its first president was the Reverend Samuel Johnson. His son was Constitution signer William Samuel Johnson of Connecticut. Princeton was then known as the College of New Jersey. It was founded as a Presbyterian institution. Its first president was the Reverend Jonathan Dickinson. He was succeeded in that office by the Reverend Aaron Burr Sr., father of the future Vice President of the same name. And later, another president of the College of New Jersey, now Princeton, was the Reverend John Witherspoon. So, two other signers, Richard Stockton of New Jersey and Benjamin Rush, who I mentioned, of Pennsylvania, went over to Scotland, made a second try at inducing this famous Presbyterian Scottish preacher to leave his homeland and come to America. And he did so. And the Reverend John Witherspoon assumed the presidency of the College of New Jersey and later signed both the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. The College of William and Mary, the second oldest college in America, founded as an Anglican institution, again, founded to train ministers. Its first president was the Reverend James Blair, who was the great uncle of Constitution signer and United States Supreme Court Justice John Blair of Virginia. Another later president of William and Mary was the Reverend James Madison, who was a cousin of President James Madison. And President James Madison, by the way, was an Anglican who nonetheless attended the Presbyterian College of New Jersey, studied theology and political philosophy, possibly with an eye toward going into the ministry himself, although he never did. Studied directly under whom? The famous Reverend John Witherspoon. The University of Delaware was founded as the New London Academy by the Reverend Francis Allison, also a Presbyterian institution. Rutgers University then was called Queen's College, and it was founded, and I was surprised to learn this, as a Dutch Reformed institution. Its first president was the Reverend Rutson Hardenberg. And the University of Pennsylvania, then called the College of Philadelphia, it's also been in the news because its president also just resigned, was founded by Benjamin Franklin. And although it was not a sectarian institution, Franklin recruited the Reverend William Smith to be its first president. He was an Anglican priest who actually prevailed in some disagreements with Franklin, and largely after that, the institution became very Anglican in its flavor as well. I would suggest to you that all of those institutions and more are unrecognizable today from what they were founded to be. What was the first public elementary school in America? Anybody know? It was called the Boston Latin School. It was founded in 1635 under the influence of the Reverend John Cotton, who was an Anglican but a Puritan who became known as the father of Congregationalism in America. The students at Boston Latin School included Benjamin Franklin, when it was headed by the Reverend Nathaniel Williams. And other signers who attended Boston Latin included John Adams, Francis Dana, John Hancock, whose own father was the Reverend John Hancock and had baptized, among others, John Adams. James Lovell, another signer who attended, Robert Treat Paine, and William Hooper. For most of that time, the headmaster at the school was a man named John Lovell, James Lovell's father, whose sole criterion for admission into the school was what? The ability to read verses from the Bible. Imagine that in today's public schools. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he famously wrote that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He referred to the laws of nature and of nature's God. He appealed to the supreme judge of the world, and he invoked a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. The Articles of Confederation found its approval in the great governor of the world. And the United States Constitution speaks of the blessings of liberty. Those references to our rights coming from God are no mistake. They are precisely what made us foundationally different from any nation that had come before us. Question, where in our founding documents would you find the separation of church and state clause? Nowhere. Glad you all know that. The phrase came from Thomas Jefferson, President Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists of Connecticut, who were concerned about their ability to freely exercise their religion as they saw fit, because back in that day, the colonies had established religion. Virginia was an Anglican colony. Massachusetts was a congregational colony, etc. And we did away with that ultimately with the First Amendment and the No Establishment Clause. But the Danbury Baptists wrote to Jefferson and were concerned and asked him, will we be able to practice our religion as we see fit without being penalized under the law as they were in some places? And he wrote back to assure them that yes, you will be able to exercise your religion as you see fit. But the phrase was meant to protect the church from state interference, not to protect the state from the church. And yet the godless left in America today has convinced many Americans that it means precisely the opposite of what it actually meant. In 1964, years before he was elected president, Ronald Reagan gave a speech called the Reagan Freedom Speech, in which he said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free." That's why we have to keep fighting this battle for our kids and our grandkids. And you know what? Evil never quits, so we can't either. It may seem that the godless left has won the battle, and of late, the days have seemed rather dark indeed. But I'm actually becoming more optimistic about where this battle is headed. The godless left always overreaches, and they've done so yet again. They've gone too far, as they always do, and more Americans are seeing it for the insanity that it is. You see it in opinion polls. You see it in the number of people opting for homeschooling and private and Christian schooling. You see it in some court victories. You see it in the recent forced resignations of certain elite university presidents. You see it in the acquisition of Twitter by Elon Musk. And you're beginning to see it, I think, in renewed church attendance and calls for religious revival in America. So my message would be encouraged, but don't be complacent. There's a long way to go in this battle. Be strong, be resolute, do not be afraid. Stand firm, fight for truth, integrity, morality, and freedom. Fight for your kids and grandkids, and never, ever give up. Thank you for joining me in that battle. If we want to preserve America as the country it was founded to be, a country that respects our God-given rights and freedoms, it's a battle that we must fight and win. Thank you so much for having me. So if you're interested in a book, I got it in the back. There's 3 volumes, or there's brochures. We can find them online. I have a website called foundersownwords.com. You can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and elsewhere. Sure. Questions?
Anybody have questions?
Go Fox.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about this lately, but in those founders and framers, as they talked about religion, were they talking about world religions? Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism?
Yeah, you won't find any Buddhists or Confucians, whatever you call them, among our founders. There weren't any Jewish folks among our founders, but we share. Some of my strongest supporters with this book are Jewish folks, and it's because I think what I said. We share a value system and a tradition, right? And all of that is under assault right now. So I don't know if they would. I think, there were varying degrees. Jefferson, for example, was very much free exercise, more than some of them were. Some of them wanted to make Protestantism official religion. They had those debates. But, so they might not outlaw Buddhism or anything of that sort. I don't think they would do that. But certainly it was Christian principles that underlay what they believed and what they believed that this country should be.
So in the Establishment Clause, then, in the First Amendment, it's not talking about religion as world religion. That's my question.
Well, I think what the Establishment Clause means is we're not going to do what they did and where we came from. And what we did when we came here first, we set up Virginia as an Anglican colony, right? And Baptists and others were persecuted under the law. We're not going to do that. Everybody, so we're not going to have one established church, but all of them were from the Christian heritage and very much were Christians. Jefferson was a little, out there in some ways, and I describe him, he's in volume 3, which is where I covered the signers from the southern colonies, including Virginia. And I refer to Jefferson as the intellectual of his day, in all of its good senses and bad senses. He was very smart, he spoke 4 languages, very bright guy, and I think he suffered from the same problem that too many modern day intellectuals do also. They think so highly of their own abilities and their own ability to think that they don't appreciate human limitations. And so Jefferson thought if he couldn't reason his way to understand something, he would reject it. So he rejected some things in Christianity that you and I take on faith, but I think it's because of the hubris, the arrogance of intellectuals, and he had some of that. Yeah.
It's a freedom of religion, not from religion, correct?
Correct. Freedom of religion. Yes.
Yeah. So it was not supposed to be that we were not a religious people. It was to not be dictated upon us that we're all going to become Catholic.
Exactly right. Catholic or Presbyterian or anything else. You have a choice, right? And that's the free exercise to be. Free exercise clause went hand in hand with it. We can each exercise freely how we want. We're not going to establish a single denomination as our church, but they were all Christians and they all believed in promoting religion, not separating it from our religion. And as I said, Benjamin Rush, for example, was one of those who adamantly believed it should be the core of our school teachings. Anybody else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, feel free to like and subscribe if you made it this far. Have a good day.